Welcome to the inaugural Geoflow podcast, where we're talking things tech, things geospatial, and just whatever else we find interesting. My name is David Ildenfritz, and with me, as always, is Jordan Rising. And Jordan, as we were kind of talking beforehand here, two goals with this inaugural podcast episode. The first is to, I guess, give background on who we are. Answer the age-old question of why people should give a crap about us. They probably shouldn't, but the goal is to share a little bit of our background, who we are, how we know each other, which nobody probably cares to know, but give a little background on that. Yeah, they're gonna know regardless, because this is our podcast, and so we're probably gonna talk about it for way too long. And then the other goal is to, I guess, share what the Geoflow platform is, how it's kind of progressed from various other projects that we've worked on, and then a little bit of our hopes, dreams, aspirations, goals, so that hopefully people can follow along with the build. We have on our website a countdown timer, or a count up timer, I guess. We've been working on this for 40 some odd days since inception at this point. So hopefully folks will get to follow along with the journey, and if nothing else, they can laugh at our failures along the way, but hopefully rejoice in some successes as well. Is that a good introduction, overview of what we're going to try and accomplish here?
Yeah, I just have to laugh because I know that I've listened to too many podcasts to recognize you who have listened to too many podcasts, because your intro was, with me as always is Jordan. As you just explained that it's the inaugural podcast. I've literally never done this with you. We've worked together for 10 years, but as
See,
always,
as
but there
always,
is but there is meaning to that, and it ties into your last point, because the as always might be confusing because it is our first podcast for Geoflow, but we've actually been working together for far too long.
well, maybe you can then illuminate people with how we actually know each other. I would say not only have we been working too long together, but we've also known each other far longer than either of us would like to admit. How
well,
do we know each other, Jordan?
yeah, so we were talking about this yesterday. We were asking how long we've officially been working together, and I guess you could say unofficially working together, or how we know each other. So the big background is that we're brothers-in-law. So David is just as lucky as
Unfortunately.
unfortunately, yeah, unfortunately for both of us. We are
We have to see
brothers-in-law.
each
So
other at Thanksgiving.
yes, we always have to be nice, because then it's just going to be an awkward holiday.
Yep.
But we started working together back in 2015. So we had a company called Flight Evolved. So it was that was officially, what do you say? What's the legal state of Montana?
We
The
were discussing this.
incorporated.
Yeah, we were discussing this yesterday. We officially incorporated early October of 2015, but we were also discussing how Flight Evolved originally was supposed to be like a drone video company. We are technically in the credits of a low budget Hollywood B class
Oh
film,
my gosh.
because flying as a fake moose floated down the river. What was that? I don't even remember that movie's called, but we had
They
our
don't need to
first.
know. Don't
They
even
don't
give them
need
the
to know.
ammo to Google it.
Yeah, no. The guy from Independence Day was in it. Whatever that guy's name is. He lives in Butte, Montana.
Bill Pullman.
Bill Pullman, that's right. Yeah, the president.
Yep.
Anyways, we were going to be famous in the drone video world, Drone Bros, and we released our first video demo reel, which had, I mean, that in and of itself is an embarrassing. There are some good shots in there, but there's also me in a tree stand. We have a tractor.
There's nothing that makes sense. It's just you find all the cool shots you can, or what you think is cool, and you throw them in a video,
Yeah.
and that's your trailer. But when you rewatch it, you're just what does you sitting in a tree stand, and then we have a video of David's wife, Jill,
Trail
running
running.
along the trail running, and all these bits and pieces. And if you look at them completely by themselves, that they might be a cool shot, but they make no sense in a video together.
No,
But
but that was released exactly 10 years ago on
yeah,
September 23rd on our Flight Evolved YouTube channel back then. It was released on September 23rd, 2015. So
wow.
we have been working together for 10 years now,
Hmm.
officially. So,
10 years.
and
So the progression of that though is as interesting as the progression of the video, our release video, because we
well, it has
started
about as much logic behind it.
yeah, for real. So we started Flight Evolved, these drone bros, and I guess this is the background. We're giving you some
Yeah.
context and background to who we are, and
It has
I
a
would
point,
probably
maybe.
yeah, I would highly suggest fast forwarding this part. I would fast forward this part if I was listening, but
Listen to it on 2x speed on YouTube.
yeah,
Yep.
listen to it on 2x. But so yeah, we started Flight Evolved as the drone bros and videos, and this is when DJI kind of just was entering the scene. Like they have the original Phantom where you could, strap a GoPro on and do that type of thing. But our whole idea right away was we were going to build drones because building drones was still kind of the way to fly drones. I mean, you were programming flight controllers and ESCs and, you were putting together the frames and balancing, and I don't even remember the lingo anymore. It's been so long, but that was the goal. And then DJI
And we
came
did
out
we
and
did build a
yeah.
drone. And we flew it till it ran completely out of battery and fell out of the sky.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We did do that. And
Yeah.
and we realized through that failure that it's easier actually just to buy one for cheaper and far better from DJI. At that time that was a Phantom 2 then or something, maybe 3. Phantom 2 or 3, I think we got at
Yep.
that time. And we quickly then the Inspire came out, but either way, this kind of torpedoed into doing video and photo work. And then after that, we were, oh my gosh, you can do thermal imaging on drones. So we're going to be doing industrial inspections and stuff. And then Pix 4D and drone deploy entered the scene. So mapping all this survey, that's a sensitive word with
Yeah.
the drone world. But, that was big. So then we started doing that, which eventually led us the years later into kind of our bread and butter and what we actually did as a company, which was flying both drones and, manned aircraft with LiDAR, and almost exclusively for the electric utilities. And then we worked with Major League Baseball. So that's the Flight Evolved 101.
Yeah, the name was fitting for more reasons than one.
Yes.
We never were able to get the X. For some reason we both thought X would be a cool letter to have in the
Hmm.
in a name, and we never got that in there, but Evolved was certainly a fitting name because we
I think the
evolved in
principle
many
should
ways.
remain though. Adding X into, I mean, look what Elon did.
I mean,
He
Elon stole it
really,
from us, clearly. You're welcome, Elon. Yeah.
yeah. But you add X to any name and it all of a sudden becomes cooler. So our whole thing was like we wanted to be Flight X or Flight Evolved X, and it just never fit. But I think we're at the point where eventually we're going to talk about Geoflow here, by the way. But we still have the opportunity to rebrand. So we should probably highly consider GeoX or
Geoflow
Geoflow
X.
X Geoflow X. Just
Yeah, it'll be a
XXX
rebrand.
Geoflow.
Coming soon to our vibe coded website that I made because I'm a vibe coder and not a real coder like Jordan. Um, we're gonna have a major rebrand with X in it. Um,
Oh,
but no, I think I guess that's probably a good departure point. Flight Evolved was our introduction into the geospatial world, and we worked in it for I don't know how long, 6, 7 years. We did a
mhm.
lot in the utility space, engineering space, working with folks doing PLS CAD and kind of in that realm. But we did have a lot of cool projects that I think scratched more of the itch that we had, which is both of us are we're kind of two sides of a different coin. I'm an entrepreneur that's interested in tech, and you're kind of the tech entrepreneur that's sort of interested in business, and we kind of balance each other out. But the common
Mhm.
thread or theme is that we both enjoy new things, and specifically new tech, and bringing new tech to the marketplace. And Flight Evolved was kind of the first go at that, you could say.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
a
that would be accurate.
useful summary?
No, I think that nailed it. I think like a joke we pretty frequently say, well, you nailed it on the two sides of the coin, but like I find myself super passionate about the tech. So when we're talking about Geoflow here in a bit, like the libraries that are used and how it's architected and all that stuff, that's what gets me like very excited. Like that's where my passion is. But that tech passion, it's almost like has a prerequisite to it. It's like a dependency. Like I have a node or a package JSON dependency of it needing to have some level of entrepreneurship to it,
Hmm.
or like business case. Otherwise it's like tech for tech's sake. Like I like to build and I like tech, but it's really fun to like solve a problem. And I don't know, I think it's also being like really competitive, like growing up playing sports and doing that stuff. Like you wanna do things and you wanna do it well, and you, like, eye people across the table, and you wanna be like, "I wanna do it better than how they're doing it." When we talk about Geoflow, it's a lot of the stuff we're gonna talk about is how we think that Geoflow is doing things really well, but it's not saying that other people aren't doing it well too. We just feel
Hmm.
like we have an opportunity to kinda, like, to raise the ceiling or, to kinda, like, push it a little bit more, so I would say, like, that's where I stand, and yeah, so I would say that that was quite accurate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I know you'll roll your eyes. We worked together on Flight Evolved, and that kind of ignited the passion of kind of like the lidar and the tech industry and geospatial. Um, and we ended up obviously exiting Flight Evolved almost exactly 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, 5 or 6 years, or I don't know, yeah, 5 years ago.
5, yeah.
Um, and since then, we've been working on another company, Roastify, which has nothing to do with either of those, but has been a really interesting exercise in software. Which
Yep.
Flight Evolved wasn't started with software. Towards the end of Flight Evolved, we were working a lot more in software, and different kind of ways of processing data. But as far as building a SaaS product, that's really been the past 4 or 5 years. With Roastify, again, it's I somewhere around here I have an example. We make custom printed coffee package, products for businesses and whoever, but that that particular company has a full API, and integrations with all sorts of different types of platforms because of that tech background. Maybe excessive in many regards, for a coffee company. But this was, a an exercise in really the SaaS side of things, and we've had upwards of 10,000 merchants come through that platform, and the first kind of large code base. And I was thinking about this the other day. You are kind of like the very last of a dying breed of people who have like taught themselves to self code prior to AI
Dummies.
coming out. Yeah,
Yeah.
dummies that didn't wait the extra 2 years like I did, where now all I care about is vibe coding. You're like the last, the
Oh, I don't
last
know about that.
you're like an antiquated, out of date, relic of somebody who like took Scrimba classes and like, took some
No.
like courses on.
I'm a hybrid that doesn't do either particularly well, I think is what you're trying to say.
But Roastify was like a good way of like putting all of that again before AI was around and you could just slop vibe code it together. Building out a platform. I mean, I don't even remember what the total code base is now, but 3 or 4 different apps all in a mono repo, and million plus lines of code that you actually had to write. It wasn't just I mean, well, the website, I did a lot of the website, and that is a lot of vibe coding. And
Mhm.
so all those lines we can claim are vibe coded, but
Mhm.
the actual app itself, you wrote all those lines. So that's a again, as we follow the trajectory, and like you said, eventually we're going to talk about Geoflow, but that's a necessary part of it, in that it was our foray into like, how do you build and architect software in such a way that you're solving a useful problem, or
Mhm.
you know actually able to handle users and
Oh,
data
man.
and privacy and security and all that stuff that nobody who's just a vibe coder like me necessarily thinks of on the front end.
Well, it's an interesting thing because, I mean, like you said, we have done software before Roastify, but it's very different when you're writing software for yourself versus writing it for, like, external users, or, like, just call them customers, because, like, I think what I've learned the most from Roastify is that what I think is best is hardly what's best in the code, right? Like, um, you find yourself making maybe you over engineer something. I mean, that's a classic one, right? Like you over engineer a solution when at the end of the day it doesn't matter, right? And the end user, it doesn't matter. And the things that are important to the end user are in no way, shape, or form like a priority in your mind. Like um, everything from like over optimizing performance to changing out packages and, I mean, updating things and, whatever, switching to the newest tech. And all at the end of the day, the user just wants to be able to hit save or, submit an order. So, I definitely am still guilty of that because I still am kind of technician first, so I find myself guilty of that pretty frequently. But yeah, the main lesson learned is that like what actually provides value in a code base, and it's going to be I mean, that's going to be a challenge for me. I mean, for years. I mean, certainly I'm not to a point where I've solved that. But in the last 40 days that we said, starting Geoflow, I constantly have to like calibrate myself to that. Is like, what can you do versus, what should you do? And those are, and finding that line is very difficult, especially when you're working on it in a small team because, you don't have like a sense of grounding, of, you know, other contributors and stuff like that. So either way, I have to find myself,
You're not
checking
gonna take
myself frequently.
you're not gonna take my advice on how to architect a particular solution from
No,
what
the
I
classic
chat
back and forth
GPT
is
2 seconds earlier. Like, no, I think we should do this.
yeah. Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating when you're in a dynamic of one being kind of the more tech, forward person and writes the code and not is when you're having the longest day of just wrestling like the bundler or compiling issues or like the stuff that like nobody externally can see. It's not making its way to the UI. It's not making its way really to anything. And
The
you're like,
UI is all that matters anyway. So
yeah, UIs, and it's like, you're like dependencies or anything like that, you're battling all this, and then you get done, and somebody that like uses your app says like, "Well, why doesn't this work?" And all I want to do is take my computer and throw it 500 yards into the lake. Oh, that's like the classic. I would say the dichotomy of me versus you. So it's like, oh, how come this doesn't work? I haven't done it.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
gosh.
that sounds about right. It sounds like a
Yeah.
daily occurrence.
Oh gosh.
Um,
Right.
but
At this point, people are far too they know
yeah,
too
we're
much about us. We better talk about Geoflow.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good segue. Obviously, we come from the geospatial world and spent a lot of time there and understand that world pretty well. And we've spent a lot of our more recent time working in the software world and SaaS products. And kind of the genesis or the bringing together of those two is Geoflow, and it came from initially working on the Quantiscan app, where some people may know of Aura and things like that, but was again on this kind of SaaS for the geospatial industry. And what was kind of born out of that as we've worked on that the past year has been, building out, a platform that addresses some of just kind of the core foundational issues with the geospatial world and bringing some automation and, at some point, some of the obvious kind of AI and super popular trendy stuff, but there is some really great applications of it,
Mhm,
providing a platform for those things. Um, and so Geoflow, our goal with it is to build a geospatial automation tool set. And we were talking about this yesterday. We talked about this a lot, is the idea that geospatial data, GIS data in general, is primed for automation. It
mhm,
is, such procedure driven, procedural data. It's all very structured data, but it's still like so siloed in the industry currently. Like, to access that data requires somebody who knows ArcGIS or knows QGIS or knows MicroStation or has an intimate knowledge of those software platforms, and it's very hard for somebody a couple layers up, a key stakeholder or somebody that just wants an answer to a question. I mean, I remember this back at Flight Evolved. I'm not a technician, or I'm not as technically inclined, and so be like, oh, I just want to answer this question. and you'd have to go like, okay, I need to, I need our GIS guy to go pull this data in and pull this in and get me this map. And then once I have all this, then, somebody can make some sort of inference or conclusion off the data. And it's like, it's primed and it's structured in such a way that it should be just a perfect candidate for automation and for, agentic AIs and all sorts of kind
Mhm.
of cool ways of using that data. So I guess, with that kind of background, Geoflow, our goal with it to be this automation platform, we have a couple of different, foundational pillars, I guess you could say. And it starts maybe with the node orchestration, and maybe you can explain that a little bit for somebody who doesn't know what node orchestration is, or you can defend it for people that think node orchestration is stupid. Why did we choose node orchestration as kind of like the foundation to the platform, and I guess what is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, like, I mean, it's GIS is primed for automation, but I think back, I mean, I guess, like, our scenario at Flight Evolved, may not speak to everyone, of course, but, almost every project had the same, I mean, set of workflows that you went to. I mean, because, when we say Flight Evolved projects, like, I'm referring to a typical LiDAR project. You would fly that project, you would get back, you would, calibrate, you do your, initial processing stuff, all your trajectory-based stuff, you'd strip a line, blah, 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 almost 9 out of 10 times or 99 out of 100 times, you're running ground classification, getting rid of noise, maybe strategically thinning if and or necessary. You're doing all these things, reprojecting to the final project, requirements, applying Z shifts to your project data or all these things. And I mean, unless it randomly doesn't require a survey or something like that. But again, for us, 99 out of 100 times, you did those for any project in the world, electric utilities, topo projects, you name it. So being able to say, I want to be able to do that for every single project would be nice, but one of them is done in, like you said, MicroStation. One of them is done, maybe you're, doing stuff in, TerraSolid, or I guess that's in MicroStation, but, you're running through 5 or 6 different softwares to do this. You're in Global Mapper because Global Mapper, does reprojections and handles coordinate systems really well. And then you're in, maybe some command line things, maybe running LAS tools. And either way, the point being is that you have these islands, and you're kind of like working between this island, microstation, this island, blah, 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 to get your way to the end. And to go back to your question, why node orchestration? It's to say that, like, how can you make these islands talk to each other? Like, how can you take and automate between these islands? How can you do stuff here, have it talk to this next thing here, but be intelligent about it? So, like, you can automate in a static way where it's like, if you get a ground class and you have a point density that's over 100, you know, maybe I want to thin it. But maybe you add a different project, you flew a different aircraft and it's less than 100. Well, I don't want to thin on that project or, do some thinning. So I don't want to write an automation, in Bash or Python. It's like, because every single project's going to be just had or have just enough nuance where you can statically create these automations. So how can we create an automation that has a little bit of intelligence to it? And that is where kind of Geoflow, and that's where node orchestration comes in, is to say, like, we want this automation, but we need to pepper in intelligence of some sort, and that might be AI in some places. And in some other cases, it might be a little bit more binary, like conditionals, if else. Like, if it's a point density over this, do this, run this branch. If it's not, do this. But you have those all over the place, not just for point density. You have that kind of those logic gates all over the place, and you can create meaningful automations, at least in our mind, meaningful automations. So that was a long-winded, but hopefully that helps explain the orchestration part a little bit more.
Yeah, and maybe it'd be helpful if you wanted to pull it up and show a little bit of kind of what that could look like. Again, a lot of the examples we use are based on LiDAR, and ultimately, when you think about node orchestration, you think about what we're building with Geoflow. Node orchestration is not new. There's companies like N8N and Make.com and Relevance.ai. There's a lot of node orchestration type companies out there for just your basic marketing workflow or accounting workflow or whatever it is. Specifically though for Geoflow, our goal is to bring specific geospatial tools to that arena. And you're not going to go into make.com and put something together for processing a LiDAR workflow. And it's not going to natively have, GIS MCP tools or things like that. And so, our goal specifically with Geoflow is to say, somebody ought to be able to use these existing open source libraries, and we'll talk about them at some point. Jordan and I like to argue that the name of PDAL is PDAL, not Poodle, and Howard Howard probably will yell out at us about that.
He'll be
but
rolling in his grave.
rolling in his grave. He's as alive and as well as he ever could be, but he'll be rolling in his grave. But a library like that, again, it's not accessible by an N8N or some of these other node orchestration libraries. And our goal is to say like, hey, well, it should be, you should be able to chain together some of these types of pipelines. And so that's what, we're putting together, and that's what's on the screen now. And maybe you could just show like a basic PDAL, pipeline, I guess, project or something like that, where you just like, you put in maybe a logic gate and you have a couple of different ways that it could go. So somebody could kind of conceptualize what that looks like, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll try not to get too caught up in the details here, just as an overview. It's like David said, if you're familiar with any other node orchestration things like N8N or things like that, it'll have a very similar behavior. So what you're seeing in the middle of my screen, this canvas, is where we drag and drop nodes. So nodes can just be added to the screen from the nodes tab over here on the right. And when you add them, they get chained together with this little animated line here. And from a very high level, how this works is all nodes, they don't run at the same time. Now, we do have exceptions where they do run at the same time, but generally speaking, a node will execute, and then it'll go to the next node downstream, and it'll execute, and it'll go to the next one and execute. So it's a very sequential flow. So when you add in, logic, it'll evaluate the logic and move downstream. So I'll show you what that looks like. We have this node called PDAL app. So this runs PDAL applications. So in PDAL, they have a thing called applications here. So things like info and ground and density. It's good for kind of like standalone operations, like getting the info of a point cloud, but it's kind of like an isolated node to run. But we'll start with that because it's conceptually fairly simple to understand. I have a directory on my computer, this data directory, which is bound to a volume that this app is running with. So when I specify small dash test here, it knows I am referring to this data directory here. And I'm going to just, for the sake of, I got to save this first, but for the sake of this demo real quick, I'm just going to execute it to show what happens. So I'm hitting execute, and the nodes change color at the top to green. That's they completed. And you'll notice an output tab for my first node, and you'll notice an input tab on my second node. So this first node runs, and it's going to output data. And if I click on this tab, I can see that data. So I ran a PDAL info operation on this small test.las, and here's the general high level of that file. And that's going to be the exact same thing as the input data for my next node. So this next node here is a condition node. So this is going to do very, like your normal programming if else statements. So we can say, if a certain expression is true, run a branch that's connected to this handle right here. So if I add a handle, so I can add a handle there. I can add two more just to articulate this. I'll try to keep it go a little quicker here, so we're not getting too into the details for this, but I'll just do one quick example. So we'll say, if, we'll see what fields we have available. So we have point count. So we'll say, I'm going to just hit paste here. So if the count is greater than 500,000, so if the count was greater than 500,000, it's going to run this branch. If not, it's going to run the next branch, and I'll say if the count, or maybe say, I'm actually just going to get rid of that one. I'm getting too confusing here.
Simplify.
We'll simplify. We don't need multiple if else. But I'm going to run this, and if it's over 500,000, it's going to run this branch. If not, it's going to run this branch. And you can see that, okay, well, the file is not greater than 500. We'll say 400. I'm going to run it again, and it runs the other branch. So that's how node orchestration works. You run things. These nodes run sequentially. They hit logic gates, or you can have it fetch data from an API, or you can have it, get files from Google Drive. Like you could, to start this workflow, you could have it get files from Google Drive, and then you could have a condition after this one that says, hey, if there's any files that are created today and they have a file extension of .las, run this whole PDAL pipeline. So, there's a lot you can do there.
And I guess that's kind of the important part of like, conceptually, what you demoed here is like, some if else statements and things like that. But, the goal with it is to say that, and the goal of the platform is to be able to tie together data and different workflows and even different applications. So people, so that Geoflow isn't just like another, a different SaaS product that you have to be tied to or handcuffed to, but rather that it can be, another tool in your toolbox of already existing tools that makes you more efficient. So, we talked about like, back at, in Flight Evolved, a lot of the engineering teams that we worked with used Procore for project management. And
Right.
it's like very easily we could have a Procore, set of tools where you fly your LiDAR flight, and it updates a Procore project, and the initial processing is done, and it updates with a Procore message, or you have all of your documentation in there, for your specific project, and you have an agentic agent in here that looks at the data and it flags a potential issue and updates to Procore, or you have a Slack message that gets sent, or there's a lot of the creativity is really only limited by whoever's kind of architecting the solution, but being able to tie in stuff like if you're using Amazon S3 for storage or Google Drive for storage, that can kickstart a process. And then at various parts along the process, you're either sending Slack updates or Procore or whatever other project management app that you use. It's providing kind of some of those human in the loop steps as well. So it's node orchestration as a concept allows for a lot of flexibility, which again, for people to actually want to use this platform, our thesis is that having that flexibility is important, to like fit into existing workflows rather than like trying to convince people to start a brand new workflow or throw out all of their old tools and use this new one.
Right. And it's important to understand that the nodes that we have right here are just the nodes that we started with in the first 40 days, right? So, not all of these are finished, by the way. Most of them are, but there's a lot of them here that that we haven't gotten to yet either. But the general philosophy is that we want this node list to continue to grow with integrators. It's like you said, Procore, or I mean Esri and ArcGIS. Those all have public APIs, REST APIs, things like that that you can create nodes for and interact with your assets, resources, and other platforms, and pull them in. So that's kind of like the open source part of this that gets us really excited. But like the schedule node here, right? We executed that last example by hitting the execute button, but you could have this run every day. You could add a cron that runs, every single day or every single hour, or on the month. Um, you could have this run just behind the scenes, and every single day at 8 a.m. it does some certain operation. Um, or if you wanted to be more based off of events, you could have it, get hit from a webhook. And the webhook basically, fires off your workflow. So there's a lot of different ways to execute on. There's a lot of different ways to invoke these workflows. But yeah, those are the main two besides AI and chat. Do you want to give a quick overview on that side of it then, dude?
Yeah, yeah, and I think again, kind of like the node orchestration side, we've kind of thought of as the foundation to build from because we think there's so many different applications of it. Of like, we've talked about like drone in the box, where you have a drone that goes and flies something, uploads data, and then kicks off a whole workflow. Or there's a lot of different applications of it, and that kind of being the foundation. But what we also have talked about is, you know, how to then use that foundation and apply AI intelligently on top of it. And I think you put it in one of our original blog articles, but it was the idea that we're AI ready, not AI first. And I
Mhm.
think that's a really important concept. Again, you know, Silicon Valley VC, throwing money at agentic AI and saying like this is going to solve every problem you've ever had, and we know that again we've followed since the Flight Evolved days people trying to classify lidar data with a one step, one shot AI
One
to
shot.
classify an entire data set. It's like, and it never works because there are so many intricacies involved in a geospatial process that you can get to 95 or 90% or something like that, but the remaining 10% is hot garbage. And so,
Right.
having watched that, our goal with AI has been, okay, how can we intelligently apply AI to specific parts of the process that that we know it can add like real tangible value to. And so maybe that's perhaps some of the context, and you can kind of show what we've been working on of like how then we want to kind of weave in agentic AI, which again is very useful and very powerful, but apply it in a, I guess, more, I don't want to say intelligent and sound like we're super
Purposeful.
purposeful. Yeah, yeah, we're not intelligent, but at least AI can be purposefully applied.
It can be purposefully intelligent is what
Yes.
you're shooting for. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I think that's, I mean, you as the, vibe coder that you are will, or have experienced this millions of times. AI is great when it's great, but it's awful when it's not great, of course. Go figure. But, I think where people fall on their face with AI is they're trying to use AI to solve everything, and they're trying to solve it all in one big, I mean, we call it one shot, but they, like, we're going to create an AI app and it's going to solve all our problems, versus understanding that AI is a very, very useful tool, of course. I mean, LLMs especially, but using them in the right context, right? Using them in the right situations where they can succeed is really important. So early on, the example of how do you use an AI purposefully and how do you use it like in a situation or in a context where it can do well for you is using the right tooling. So we found it's an awesome open source MCP server for, it's just for GIS. So it's a GIS MCP server. So like there's a pretty much 90% of the inspiration for our GIS MCP server is from that repo. But but basically we can take an agent node. So this agent node was just found here in the nodes list, and we can give it just a system prompt, which is a global instruction to it. It's not the message that we're sending to it, which we're going to do in the chat bar here on the right, but it's just kind of the global instructions of, hey, this is what you're generally expected to do. I picked OpenAI for now, but we do have Olama support, so you can connect to a base URL. So I was running my own Olama server here just a little bit ago. I can't do that while I'm screen recording because this little 5-year-old MacBook just is not going to be happy if I do that. But we want to be able to run this all locally, and there's big implications for that. There's cost implications. Running your own AI or LLMs locally obviously is cheap. It's free, assuming you can have the resourcing to do it. But security, I mean, you're not sending requests to Anthropic or to OpenAI. Everything is on your machines or your clouds. So from a security perspective, running your own LLMs and open or your own models is really important. But I'm going to select the MCP tools, the GIS tools here, and we're just going to use OpenAI for now. What kind of example should I do here, David?
I mean, the classic generate some random points in Montana. That's a good one.
Okay, so generate random
Maybe make a
points,
map at some
coordinates
point.
in the Montana area and save them as a KML. In the KML September demo.kml. Please use your MCP tools. The
Gotta say please when
coordinates
dealing with AI.
completely random and don't need to be exactly in Montana. Ignore all those spelling errors because I'm not going to go back and change them. But let's see how we do here. So the biggest thing you'll notice is that it's thinking. Go figure. But these are we did set these up a little opinionated for now. We might pull back on the opinionated portion of it depending on how this all goes, but we do have them set up with kind of a base architecture to it's called the React paradigm. So it's not React like the front end UI framework, but the React framework where it basically takes your prompt, it evaluates it, and it'll go in a loop until it basically deems that it's fulfilled your request properly. So you can see that, hey, thought, I will generate these 20 points. Or I didn't give it a number, I guess, but 20 works. And the action that it's going to take is it's going to create a KML with those random points near Montana. And it's going to, okay. And so then it kind of goes back and says, like, how did I do? So that's what the observation is. Like, hey, how did I do? And the KML was processed and saved. So if I go to the top right, I'll see that there's a new output, a tool output, and this one's called export coordinates to KML. And it saved it to my computer as September-K demo.kml. What you said web map too then, David? Should we do that?
Oh sure. Yeah, create a leaflet map.
Okay, great. Can you also create a web map using create web map MCP tools with the same data?
And so the
Less
goal, I
spelling
mean,
errors that time.
yeah, you're learning.
I'm learning.
Obviously the goal with it again, and I don't know, it speaks to me, the vibe coder, or the non-technical person, but that is kind of the goal of the AI side of it, is saying like, this could be something that we fall back to utility examples because utilities are where we worked in most of our geospatial experience. And so you have lots of like project managers or people who like are trying to, they're saying like, hey, I have these poles in this high fire threat area, and typically they'd be like, hey, GIS person, can you generate this map for me? Send it back. In a couple of days, they may get their map back, and that is just, it's not a great user experience for a project manager that wants to answer a question immediately. And part of our goal with this is saying like, well, they could have this running on even just their iPhone or something. They could see that a fire sprang up in some East County, San Diego, or something like that, and want to see, okay, how many poles are in this 5-mile radius, and they could query an agent like this that has access to all of the data, access to all their web maps, and could quickly create a map for them that says, hey, here's every one of your poles in this area, and pull in additional data like these ones are steel and you don't have to worry about them burning to the ground, but these ones are wood and they might burn to the ground. And really provide kind of that typical LLM, back and forth dialogue, where previously that would be like handcuffed to, oh, go to our GIS guy here, ask him the question, send an email, get an email back, asking for clarifications, and a week later you finally get your map or whatever.
Right.
That's kind of the goal with something agentic, I guess, or one of the goals of many, I'm sure. But
Oh, for sure. And yeah, like you said, asking the GIS guy in your company to do all this and waiting for a response, that's a level of friction that's difficult. But we'll we'll be improving this. This is actually the agent stuff and the MCP tools is probably less than a week old here. So there'll be a lot of improvement here as we continue to go. We'll see if this actually, oh, it did work. I had to give it a little nudge there at the end if you saw. So we'll have to improve the prompt or the MCP tools to deliver that right away. But yeah, right here in your tools output, you can see a map with those. I could open this in a new tab, which, if this was a more realistic use case. Maybe those with poll locations or something like that. But it kind of ties into one of the first things or the joke we were making even with Roastify and providing actual value. So, and I have to keep myself in check, right? Like, so I think where we need to get with this, it's obviously not there now, but we need to get to the point to where the chat interface here, you create this workflow, you create this system prompt, you do all this, and that needs to be exposed, externally to an user, right? To a PM or to, some stakeholder to where they're not opening Geoflow on, your cloud or wherever you're hosting it. Again, it's open source, so you can put this where you want it. But maybe it's a phone app and a URL and they're just going on their phone and asking for this. So basically this workflow here and this chat interface is exposed as, a URL. And they're not opening Geoflow, they're not opening the app and then opening this workflow. And they're like, well, what's a system prompt? And what providers do I pick? And I guess even so, that would be perhaps saved, but trying to reduce that friction and hopefully make it helpful to people. That's the goal, but obviously we're not there yet. So but that's in the back of the old noggins for us. But yeah, not quite
Yeah,
there yet.
yeah. I mean, and that's probably a good segue into the last part of, again, obviously the core of what we're building with Geoflow is, automation tools for GIS, using node orchestration, and then a heavy emphasis on agentic AI, um, purposefully, intentionally applied. um,
Purposely intelligent. Yeah.
yeah, purposely intelligent. But all of that taking place in the context of an open source platform, and you alluded to it multiple times there, but yeah, that's kind of the last component of what we're building. And obviously at some point, we want this to be a commercially viable company that can continue to expand and bring on additional resources to help expand it quicker and build cooler tools and more powerful tools and things like that. Like, we would be lying if we didn't say that that wasn't a part of it. But,
Hmm.
prior to that, our goal with saying this is open source is saying, we don't want to be focused on some kind of narrow MVP, monetization strategy. And it's easy to kind of get that narrow focus of like, well, what's the quickest thing we can make money with? And, push that out on people and force that upon people and, run ads at it. And, that isn't ultimately the goal of the platform. The goal that we've, talked about a lot is open sourcing the platform, building a community and trying to build something really powerful that fits, a lot of different workflows, whether it's people adding Esri nodes or MicroStation or, Procore or different project like different stakeholders adding in the things that make it useful for them and building a community of folks that are, that is open. And we've talked a lot about, kind of the closed source nature of a lot of the geospatial industry and kind of the AEC, like engineering, construction, architecture, like that general industry globally is kind of closed in a lot of regards. And part of the goal of this too is saying like, how can a rising tide lift all boats? How can we, take our experiences, whatever little ones we have, perhaps fresh perspectives, and try and raise the bar for everybody, and build a community of folks that are kind of committed to that same thing. But I guess the open source part is definitely an important side or aspect of this.
Yeah. And like saying all this, at the risk of not sounding too cliche, right? Like, cause, at the end of the day, you know, I mean, we see or we feel very strongly that for us, at least from the business side, that opportunity will come with value. So it's been difficult to say like, here's what the business is and here's how it's going to make money someday. Um, because that's not how we started this. We didn't start off with a monetization strategy. It started off with like, we're going to open source this. This is going to have a ton of value. And from that value, hopefully there'll be opportunity someday, and that's really backwards. And probably the entrepreneurs and us die a little bit saying that. And it's not to come across as, some great martyr or some, like, here's us awesome people. It's more that we truly do believe that this is going to have a lot of value in the industry, a lot of value for people who have otherwise had solutions that maybe like required a ton of friction, a lot of buy-in, and like we have to dump, X thing that we've been using for many years to adopt this new one. That's what we're trying not to do. Say like, you've been using these tools, you're probably very skilled in those tools. You have people that you hired specifically for them or train them on. Like it's way the level of friction and commitment in a lot of the softwares that we're seeing is so high that it's probably even hard for them to have success, outside of like large enterprise sales. So how can we add value to the industry, but allow people to continue to do the things that they do well or use the tools that they use well, but just do them all better, So, that's right now, this is open source and we're going to continue to push that. And we see that there's a ton of value in getting the community engaged and, contributing everything from code and their opinions and their feedback and everything. That's all drives to a very important thing, but looking at it and, through that lens first, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, again, bringing it back to the very beginning, which we've probably rambled on for a long time, the idea being, why should people give a crap about what we're building? Because, I mean, I think you mentioned it a couple of days ago, with all of the AI tools out there, building software has become easier, certainly. Building good software is still tremendously difficult, and
Mhm.
addressing all of the common pitfalls of software is still. You can vibe code something, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a million bugs that you are unaware of. Every time I commit something, and you review it, you're like, "Why did you do it that way?" Like, I don't know. Claude Code did it that way. um, but it's easy to throw things out there, and the challenging part is, how do you get people to be interested in it? And that is ultimately our goal, is to say that, we want to provide a ton of value to this industry, so it's self-evident that this thing is valuable, versus,
Mhm.
just being another vaporware, selling something for the
Right.
sake of selling it, or saying like, I mean, we can put AI in all sorts of headlines all over a website. And I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, there's a lot of VC money that goes to things that just have AI plastered everywhere.
Right.
But rather than doing that, saying, let's give something to people to play with, to see if it actually augments their workflow, to see if it helps, to receive their feedback back, and then iterate and continue to build tools that are hopefully helpful for people. But avoiding the vaporware kind of thing, and hopefully the community aspect being why people care or want to be involved.
Yeah, and it's gonna be hard to make a meaningful contribution if you don't, I feel like, go in with that attitude. I mean, even you look at Geoflow and the technical foundations that it's built on are all open source. Like, could you imagine trying to, I mean, and you need in your vibe coding, but could you imagine trying to build a software today without open source tooling? Like, of course it wouldn't happen, or at least it wouldn't happen for me. I mean, like right now, our Geoflow is built on, well, we just migrated kind of a lot of our stuff from Next.js to 10 stack start. So that uses 10 stack start and 10 stack query. And, I mean, everything from that to, we use Convex as a backend. Convex is fully open source. You can self host that, you can deploy it, all without paying them a dime. Convex is sitting there thinking, hey, if you like it, it gives you a ton of value. Hopefully, in your next project where you need a paid thing, you'll use us. And I think that's probably similar to how we view Geoflow. Is this has a ton of value. People could fork it, run with it. And we might not see a dime of it, but secretly, well, not secretly, but what we're hoping is that hopefully this provides you a lot of value someday. That maybe we have. I'm just theorizing here because I don't know what these things would be, but if we had, paid options or, premium nodes or something like that, those are things we've talked about a little bit, because we do have Aura and stuff like that that might, be part of a paid portion where you have a viewer integrated. Maybe those are attractive things to a small percentage of the people. So when we do monetize it eventually, hopefully it has enough, stickiness or enough value that, we can make it into a viable company. But at the end of the day, if we fold and go our separate way, which we're not doing, but, hopefully that's open source and ability for you to host your own code, that de-risking nature of it is attractive too. Like, you can use Geoflow, and David and I both, died in a horrible bobsledding accident. Your Geoflow will continue to live on.
Mauled by a grizzly bear.
Yeah, the way I want to go.
Yeah, at a violent end. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's at least as of right this second, as of now, that's the goal. And I guess the call to action then, because we're entrepreneurs after all, so we have to have a call to action.
Mhm.
Is really we want people. The code isn't even public as of yet. That's on the roadmap, and that's coming very soon. If you're really, really interested, obviously you can send us an email, and maybe Jordan will bestow upon you the the code base to play with. Probably not. But our main kind of call is for folks to. I think we have 11 people, of which maybe one is active in our Discord community. We have a Discord community. We have a newsletter that has 2 of my email addresses and 1 of Jordan's to test it out. And but our hope is that people will follow along in the journey. Even things like this podcast episode or video, is part of us trying to build more in the open, to share with what we're working on, what we're excited about, what we think is cool. So if any of it is cool to you, we hope you follow along with those things. And obviously we'll be posting lots of updates, and we'll be dialoguing with people in those communities. And then as the code base becomes public, we hope that people join on GitHub, that they play around in the repo, add to the code base, submit things for consideration, argue with us about various choices, and hopefully through all of that make a better product. But that's kind of the goal with all of this, is to build out that community, and we have a couple of places where people can join in on that. And then as the code kind of becomes more public, folks join in on that side of it.
Yeah. Well said. I got it on the roadmap. Get it on GitHub. Get it public here. Hopefully within the next month, maybe 2. It's got to get in a place to where it still has it works and stuff like that. Obviously, releasing it any sooner than that kind of sets anybody that's even in the repo up for failure. So kind of getting to that base point to where we can make it public. But we're definitely excited about that, and that's probably the next major step. But if you have feedback, opinions, please let us know.
Please go to Jordan's Twitter specifically. If it's harsh feedback, if it's kind feedback, you can leave that on mine. But
you don't want to see David cry.
Yeah, it's frequent. But we appreciate if you made it through an hour of us rambling about our past and our hopes for the future. Then good on you, and we'll continue to put out update videos and continue to share what we're excited about. So thanks for joining us.
Later.